At the outset, I'd like to just introduce to you some of the salient points that Prime Minister Khan mentioned at his press conference this evening. Mr. Khan announced that this earthquake is officially called East Japan Great Earthquake, based on the cabinet meeting that was held earlier today. And he again extended his condolences to the families who lost their family members, and send words for those who are suffering from this disaster. And also, he extended his respect for those public servants, including self-defense forces, firefighters, police, and those people who are working for the municipalities, sometimes risking their lives with a sense of dedication. And also he mentioned his appreciation for the support extended from all over the world for our efforts, and he extended his utmost appreciation for all the kind assistance from the rest of the world. He mentioned something about the budget. There is a new budget being approved, but this budget proposal was submitted before the disaster. And he mentioned that some parts of the budget could be suspended, and could be, and he referred to his intention to prepare a supplementary budget to address the issues of those people who are suffering from this disaster. And this supplementary budget could be necessary in stages according to the stage of reconstruction. And as for the first stage, he mentioned that he wishes to submit the supplementary budget bill by the end of this month. And also, he referred to some of the need to go forward with the planning of reconstruction. And he's been engaged in communication with mayors and heads of municipalities who have suffered from this disaster. There are some ideas being discussed in terms of recreating a new community, for example, creating ecotown by making use of biomass with a regional warming system. And there is a need to address employment issues and reinventing the primary industry. And also he referred to the newly created conference for formulating reconstruction, and he aims to establish this new conference by the 11th of this month. And also, with regard to Fukushima Daiichi, he referred to three principles that he will stick to in tackling with this situation. Number one is putting utmost priority on the health of residents, the people, and the safety. And number two is the government will take utmost efforts in terms of risk management. And number three is to come up with various scenarios regarding what could happen, and whatever developments could take place, the government will be prepared to different contingencies. And also, in order to stabilize the situation surrounding Fukushima Daiichi, there are two major pillars. Number one is the joint efforts among the government, operators, the TEPCO, and the affiliated companies, Nuclear Safety Commission, and others. And number two is international collaboration. And he referred to his telephone conversation with President Obama with the promise of all-out efforts from the United States, and also yesterday's meeting with President Sarkozy, and in terms of receiving the assistance from France with its advanced nuclear power plants, and also receiving experts from IAEA. So, and lastly, he referred to reinventing Kizuna, bonds among the Japanese, in order to overcome these tragic events and to recreate a new Japan. And he referred to his commitments to do his utmost efforts to carry out this task. And lastly, I'd like to just touch upon Prime Minister Kan's trip to Tohoku. Tomorrow morning, he will leave Prime Minister's office by Self-Defense Forces helicopter to go to Rikuzen Takata City of Iwate Prefecture to visit the evacuation centers and other places. And also, he plans to visit the J village of Fukushima Prefecture. And he would be meeting with self-defense forces people or firefighters or TEPCO employees who are tackling the situation on site. And if due to bad weather he can't make it, it is possible that he could try on Sunday otherwise. So that's all from me, and I'd like to ask my colleagues to go next. First, Mr. Nishiyama, please.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I'd like to update the status of each plant and other information regarding Fukushima Daiichi site. Regarding Unit 1, we are introducing pure water to the reactor with a tentative electricity-driven pump. Parameters of the reactor are relatively stable right now. Spent fuel pool, we threw pure water to the spent fuel pool of Unit 1 yesterday. Regarding stagnant water in the turbine building, we are moving the water in the condensate storage tank to the separation pool surge tank. After we complete this action, we'll move the water in the hot well to the condensate storage tank to enable us to pump the stagnant water in the basement of the turbine building to the hot well. We'll place cameras to watch a depth of water of vertical part of the trench of the Unit 1 through 3 from remote places, which can be operated from remote places. Unit 2, regarding a reactor, temperature of pressured vessel began to decline after we increased the amount of pure water introduced on March 30th. Regarding spent fuel pool, we introduced pure water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 2 with a tentative electricity-driven pump. Regarding stagnant water, we moved the water from the condensate storage tank to the separation pool surge tank. So we are now ready to move the water from the hot well to the condensate storage tank. Regarding Unit 3, as for reactor, parameters of the reactor are relatively stable. Regarding spent fuel pool, yesterday we threw 105 tons of pure water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 3 with a concrete pumping machine. Regarding stagnant water of the Unit 3, today we moved the water in the hot well to the condensate storage tank as a precondition to move the stagnant water to the condensate storage tank. Water to the hot well. Move the precondition to move the stagnant water to the hot well of Unit 3. Regarding Unit 4, spent fuel pool is a concern in this unit. We threw 140 tons of water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 4 with concrete pumping machine today. In addition to those, one barge ship of the U.S. Navy full of pure water arrived at the port of the Fukushima nuclear power plant yesterday, and today we began introducing the pure water from the ship to the tank of the site. Lastly, today we sprayed synthetic plastic to make radioactive dust, not to fly over to the other places. This is a trial, and after seeing the results, we'll use it in the other places in the site. That's all for my report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishiyama. Then I'd like to ask my colleagues from MEX to go next.
文部科学省の川原でございます。
Good evening. I'm Kawarada of Mixed. We are conducting the monitoring of post out of 20-kilometer zone of Fukushima Daiichi NPP. We are looking at the airborne concentration of nuclide and other parameters on a continuous basis. There is one thing that I would like to mention. That is, there were 3 points where the dosage were higher as a result of vehicle reading. We took the samples and we checked the plutonium's concentration of 238, 239, and also the ratio of the plutoniums. And as a result, and please refer to page 10, this is the 238 was not detected, and neither the 239 and 240 were detected. None of those were detected. Uranium 235, 238 ratio was equivalent to the natural proportion. So those are the new information that I'm going to convey to you. The analysis of plutonium will take place. The samples were taken was on the 22nd of March, but it took this much to conduct the accurate analysis. Thank you.
Mr. Shinano of Nuclear Safety Commission, please.
Hi.
Thank you. This is the evaluation of environmental radiation monitoring results. This is the daily report. The original was released in Japanese at 16:45 on March 31st. And the data that we have used were those published between March 20th, 1600 hours, and March 31, 1000 hours. First, the spatial radiation dose rate. Relatively higher dose were detected in some locations, but those do not affect the people's health. First is the radioactivity in the air. Compared to 1 day ago, the iodine-131 and cesium-137, there were points where the levels were higher than a day ago. But in any case, whilst they are above the limit, they do not pose an adverse effect on the human health. Those 2 points were different from those areas where the peak were recorded. So the weather conditions may have had an impact on the readings or the values. The third is the aviation monitoring. We are still soliciting with the parties concerned whether the measurement at low altitude and low speed could be conducted. And on the seawater, no new information was presented. It does not mean that the monitoring are not conducted, but it so happened that no information was available by the time that we conducted the evaluation. But tomorrow, we would share with you our evaluation going back to the period that the evaluation has not been conducted.
Fifth is environmental radioactivity level surveyed by prefectures, but there was no new information on drinking water or tap water. Therefore, after tomorrow, we will share with you the results retroactively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Yokota of MHLW to speak.
Hello, my name is Yokota of the MHLW. I would like to talk about the results of food analysis, which were conducted yesterday. The samples were from 8 prefectures. The total number of samples was 111 samples altogether. Of them, vegetables from Ibaraki, or 8 samples, vegetable samples from Ibaraki, and 1 vegetable sample from Tochigi, as well as beef from Fukushima, and 3 samples of Chiba produced vegetables showed results which exceeded the provisional limit. For the beef sample, this is the first time that we received a beef sample which exceeded the provisional limit. But as far as this is concerned, all of the beef coming from the same cattle is under storage and has not been placed into circulation. And there will be a re-examination conducted on this beef sample. And I just received an update as a result of a reanalysis. No radioactivity was detected in the sample beef. Also, there's one sheet of paper which is a sum up of the radionuclide test results carried out since March 19th. 780 samples were taken. Of them, 137 were found to exceed the provisional limit, maximum allowable limit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yokota. Now, let's move on to Mr. Matsunaga.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. The day before yesterday, I mentioned about response to import-related measures taken by foreign countries and regions concerning the nuclear power plant accident. And in that regard, I refer to the statement provided by Ambassador Otabe at the Trade Negotiations Committee of WTO. There, he requested members not to overreact by implementing unfair import regulations and restrictions. I'd like to provide follow-up information in that regard. Yesterday, a briefing session was convened at the headquarters of JETRO in joint cooperation of MOFA and METI. That was a briefing session provided for the foreign countries present in Japan. I also would like to mention about other government meeting in that respect. Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been addressing the issue of import-related measures taken by foreign countries and territories concerning food and other imported from Japan in response to the nuclear power plant accident. The ministry has been gathering relevant information through our overseas missions and been providing information and explanations to the diplomatic corps and international organizations in Tokyo. And the ministry also has been approaching to those countries taking excessive measures. The number of countries taking measures to restrict the import of agricultural products imported from Japan has been increasing. We take this development seriously. In this regard, a meeting at the state ministers level was convened yesterday upon the request of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs under the chairmanship of Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Fukuyama. The meeting shared relevant information and discussed countermeasures. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported the current state of foreign countries' import regulations. Reports were also provided by other relevant ministries. And specifically, the meeting agreed to fully explain to other countries and territories that we have been explaining relevant information through our foreign missions and that we continue providing relevant information to the respective foreign embassies in Tokyo. The meeting also agreed that we would continue fully explaining the measures taken by the government of Japan, suspensions of shipping and procedures of food safety tests undertaken to date. With respect to the certificates of origin requested by European Union, we are already prepared to issue them covering the matter requested by European Union. With respect to fishery products, it was reported in the meeting that the existing sanitary-related measures would be taken further thoroughly. It was reported in the meeting that foreign countries would be duly reminded that ICAO, IATA, and IMO had issued press releases, respectively, stating that there is no restriction on travel to Japan, as reported from me and other officials at previous briefing here. Countries and territories would also be informed duly that the readings of radiation monitoring at Tokyo, Yokohama ports and metropolitan airports are updated twice a day and made available at the website of Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Travel. The government of Japan will continue watching closely the import regulations taken by other countries and territories and take necessary measures. Information regarding the measures taken by major foreign countries will be made available at MOFA website soon. Thank you very much.
Now, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Please limit your question to one, and please identify yourself with your name and affiliation. Christoph.
Süddeutsche Zeitung, Christoph Neidert. Question for Mr. Nishiyama. The Japanese press has been quoting experts saying it will take at least a month for a cold shutdown of the reactors and to make those fuel rod pools safe. It will take 3 to 5 years to really stabilize the whole situation and 30 years to decommission the plant. Do you share these assessments, or do you have more optimistic guessings? And maybe please don't say you don't know, because that would be read as a confirmation of these numbers. Thank you.
すみません。Affiliation? 南ドイツです。南ドイツ新聞ですけれども、西山審議官に質問です。日本のプレスなどで、専門家の意見を引用して、冷却停止に持っていくには少なくとも1ヶ月はかかるであろうと。そして、使用済み燃料プールを安全にするのには、3年から5年、そして本当に安定化させ、さらには廃炉にするまでには30年かかるであろうという専門家の意見などが新聞などに載っておりますが、その評価に関して西山審議官もシェアといいますか、同じようにお考えでしょうか。それとも審議官はもう少し楽観的な推測をしていらっしゃるのでしょうか。分かりませんという答えはおっしゃらないでくださいね。分かりませんというお答えだと、今この新聞に出ている専門家の意見を確認したというふうに取りますので。
今燃料や使用済み燃料プールを冷却しながらなんとか持続可能な冷却システムを作り上げようとしております。その過程で水を入れることが必要なんですけれども、その水がまた作業の妨げになるという非常に難しい状況に直面して、今この水をなんとか早く抜いて作業を進めたいと思っているところです。
Currently, we are trying to create a sustainable cooling system while in the process cooling the fuel and cooling the spent fuel pool. And in that process, we need to inject water, but we are faced with a difficult situation in which the water that we have to inject for cooling is, on the other hand, hindering the work that needs to be done. So we are working hard now to pump out that water as soon as possible so that we can move on with our work.
この作業がどのくらいかかるかということは非常に予測が難しくて、我々は今はこれをなるべく早くやるようにベストを尽くすというふうにしか申し上げられません。
And it is difficult to predict at the present moment how long that work will take. I can only say at the present moment that we will do our best to be able to do so as soon as possible.
それからこれが低温の停止の状態に持ち込まれたとしたときに、おそらく適切な放射能の遮蔽を行い、やがて中の燃料を取り出す時期が来ると思いますけれども、この取り出す時期が来るまでにはこれはまだ相当な時間がかかると思います。
And so when we bring the reactors to a cold shutdown, we would probably provide appropriate shielding for the radiation, and eventually there will come a time when we will be able to take out the fuel rods that are inside. but I would expect that it would take a considerable amount of time until we will come to the time when we'll be able to take out the fuel rods inside.
それからその後の廃炉の手続きは、これは日本あるいは世界の経験からしても、10年から20年のオーダーの仕事だと思います。
And the subsequent procedures for decommissioning would take in the order of 10 to 20 years, looking back on both the experience in Japan and throughout the world.
なるほど。
Hi, my name is Kosaku Narioka, and I am with Dow Jones Newswires. I know you are removing water from turbine buildings and trenches so that you can re-establish the cooling systems. And it appears to me that the progress you have been making in removing water seems to be very slow. And does this mean you believe you have some leeway in the state of reactors? In other words, you are not that particularly worried about the state of reactors at this point.
ダウ・ジョーンズ・ニュースワイヤーの成岡と申します。タービン建屋およびトレンチから現在水を取り除く作業をして、そして冷却システムを再び、確立していこうという作業を今行っておられることは承知しているんですけれども、私が見る限りその水を除去する作業の進展が相当遅いように思うんですけれども、ということは、原子炉の状況に関して、ある程度は余裕があるとお考えなんでしょうか。すなわち現時点において原子炉の状況について、特には心配していないという意味なんでしょうか。
まず水を除去する作業につきましては、今、あらゆる選択肢を考えています。例えば、まずはそのプラントの中でのさまざまな器、タンクを探し、それから廃棄物をまとめておくような場所も使い、さらにそういう中から必要であれば今度外に持ち出すことも考え、さまざまな手段を例えば、アメリカの NRC でありますとか、あればフランスのあればですとか、そういった知恵も借りながらあらゆる選択肢を考えています。
First of all, regarding the work for removing the water, we are now considering all possible options. And also, we are looking for every available tank within the premises of the nuclear power station. And also, we are trying to use any place that we can keep the waste. And if necessary, we are also looking at the possibility of transferring it outside. So we are considering a variety of different means. And for instance, we are also borrowing the knowledge and ideas of other organizations such as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC of the United States, and AREVA of France, in considering all possible options.
こうやって世界の知恵も集めて選択肢を考えているというのは、原子炉の状況については現在はある程度安定してますけれども、決して楽観はできないと思っておりまして、なるべく早くこの水を抜いて 持続可能な冷却システムを作らなければいけないと思っています。
By gathering and tapping upon all different kinds of ideas from different countries, we are now considering various different options. The status of the reactor is at the moment stable to a certain extent, but we cannot be overly optimistic. And we have to remove the water as soon as possible and create and establish a sustainable cooling system.
Dennis.
Dennis Normoyle of Science Magazine. I'm not sure whether this question should go to Mr. Nishiyama or to the gentleman from MEXT, but it concerns the amount of radiation and the amount of nuclides that have been released into the environment. Have there been, I know you're doing a lot of monitoring, has there been any calculations or studies or simulations of the total amount of radiation that has been released, and any simulations or computer studies of where that radiation in the atmosphere and in the oceans might be going?
サイエンスマガジンですけれども、この質問は西山審議官にすべきなのか、文部科学省の方にすべきなのか、ちょっとはっきりよく分かりませんけれども、環境に放出されている放射能および各種の量についてなんですけれども、相当程度のモニタリングをなさっていることは承知しておりますけれども、例えば放出された総放射能量に関する計算とか研究とかシミュレーションなどが行われているのでしょうか。そしてこの放出されている放射能がどこに行くのか、大気中に行っているのか、それとも海上といいますか、海の中に流れていっているのか、放出された放射能がどこに流れ着いているのかに関するシミュレーションとか研究はあるのでしょうか。
全体リソースまだわからない。
わかんないですよね。計算一応その内外のその我々やはり最終的にはどのくらいの放射性物質が放出されているかと予想されるかということについては考えなければいけないと思ってますけれども、今それをどうやって特定したらいいかということを検討している最中で、まだそれについてここで申し上げられるような状況ではありません。
We have to study about how much radiation is expected to be released at the end of the day, and we are now considering how specifically to do so. So we are not in a situation where we can supply that information to you at the moment.
モニタリングをしている立場から申し上げますと、放出された放射性物質はガスの形で放出されるというのが一つの形態、これが空間線量率で測れるものです。
If I may respond to that question from the position of one that is actually doing the monitoring, one form in which the radiation is released is in the form of gas. And that is the form that can be measured in the form of spatial radiation dose rate.
それから気圧性の物質が出ると、これはサンプリングをして、特定することができるんですけど、大体要素131とか、それからセシウムの137とか、こういうものがものも放出されているということです。これは空気中もそうだし、海中にも一部放出されているというふうに考えられます。
And also, there is matter, gaseous matter, that is also released, which can be identified by sampling, taking samples, which would be such as iodine 131, cesium 137, and these would be released into the atmosphere and partly into the sea.
Yes, my name is Daniel Lösing from Asia Times Online, and I have a question which is perhaps a follow-up on this, because I guess the amount of radiation that would be released would depend on the amount of damage done to the fuel rods. And previously, the government of Japan said there has been partial damage to the fuel rods, but could maybe for Nishiyama-san, maybe could you explain a little bit more in detail what partial damage means? Is that partial damage to every single rod, or does that mean that part of the rods are damaged and other part of the fuel rods are not damaged? And what is the minimum amount of damage you think that has been done to the fuel rods? Thank you.
アジアタイムズオンラインのものですけれども、先ほどの関連質問になると思いますけれども、実際に放出される放射能の量というのは燃料の既存の度合いによると思うんですけれども、以前日本政府は燃料棒は一部破損していると思われるとおっしゃっておりますが、西山審議官に対する質問なんですが、一部燃料棒が一部破損しているというのはもう少し詳しくご説明いただきますとどういう意味なんでしょうか。要するにそれぞれの燃料棒が一部破損しているのか、それとも破損している燃料棒と破損していない燃料棒とがあるという意味なのか、そして燃料棒のその最小限の既存というのはどのぐらいの水準といいますか、どのぐらいのどのぐらいなんでしょうか。
まず燃料棒が既存するというのは燃料棒が水から少し出てしまって、その部分で燃料が高温になって、で周りのジルコニウムが溶けて、水と反応してくるということで、その中で燃料がどの程度傷むかというのはまだはっきり分かっていません。ただ日本政府は1号機から3号機までのどの原子炉においても少なくても 3% 以上の燃料が損傷を受けているというふうには思っていますので、今INES の 5段階の登録をしています。
Damage, by saying damage to the fuel rod, we mean that what we mean by damage to the fuel rod is that the fuel rod has been slightly out of the water and has gone to high temperatures, which has led to the zirconium on the outside to melt and react with the water. We do not know for sure to what extent there was damage to the fuel rods. the government of Japan considers that for all of the reactors from units number 1 through 3, that there has been at least 3% or more damage to the fuel. And that is why we have registered a level of 5 based on the INES, the International Nuclear Event Scale.
Another Another question for Mr. Nishiyama. TEPCO obviously has again made a blunder with measurements, this time about the radioactivity in the table water. Can you explain what happened this time? And as we know, TEPCO is the only institution measuring around the plant. Wouldn't it be time for the government to have someone else measure these radioactivities? Thank you.
南ドイツ新聞ですけれども、西山審議官に質問があるんですけれども、東電はまた再び、飲み水といいますか、水道水の放射性レベルの測定を間違ったんですけれども、今回はどういうことが起こったのか説明していただけますでしょうか。それと原子力発電所の近辺、あるいは周りの測定を行っているのは東電だけなんですけれども、そろそろ東電以外の組織、例えば政府とか、あるいはその他の機関が放射能の測定をやる時期に来ているんじゃないですか。
まず今回、東京電力がデータの解析でミスをしたのは、ある各種について、東京電力が今使っているプログラムが、その各種の親になる各種との関係で、どのように、この動くかということを判定するそのプログラムの内容についての誤解があったということでした。
The mistake that TEPCO made this time in the analysis of the data was for the reason that there was some misunderstanding regarding the contents of the program that is being used to determine how a certain nuclide acts in relation to its parent nuclide.
今回のは最近では2回目の出来事なので、やはり東京電力としてもこれからは専門家の助言を得ながら解析作業を実施したいと言っております。ただデータを取ってその専門家の助言をするところにまでは東京電力にやってもらうことになると思います。
And this is the second time in recent days, and TEPCO itself is saying that they intend to do the analysis with expert advice from now on. In any event, the gathering of the data and analyzing it with expert advice would be done by TEPCO going forward as well.
山口さん。
AP 通信の山口です。西山さんかあるいは松永さんに当てはまるかもしれない質問なんですが、今アメリカ、フランス、それからそれ以外の国も含めて各国からどういうふうなその機材の提供があり、例えばロボットとかポンプですとかいろいろ噂には上っているんですけれども、実際に 提供があって、今後その使用される予定があるものが今の時点で分かっていれば教えていただけますか。もうすでに使われているものがあれば合わせてお願いします。
I am Yamaguchi from AP. I have a question to Mr. Nishiyama, or perhaps Mr. Matsunaga might be the appropriate person to respond. Currently, from the United States, France, and other countries, we hear rumors of a variety of different equipment, such as robots and pumps, being offered. And so, can you tell us if you know about any actual equipment that has been provided and is planned to be used? And also, can you provide us information regarding any such equipment from overseas countries that is already in use?
まず私が知っているところではアメリカからは防護服の提供があり、それから今現実のものとしてはバージ船で淡水の提供があります。
To the extent that I am aware, from the United States, we have been provided with protective suits, and also, actually, we have been provided with fresh water that is being transferred with their barge vessels.
それからアレバ社からは防護服、防護マスク、防護手袋など、それから環境の測定をする車両2台がまず今は届けられています。
And from Areva of France, we have received protective suits, protective masks, and protective gloves. And as of now, we have also received 2 vehicles for environmental monitoring, environmental measurement.
でこれらは一例になると思いますけれども、むしろ物の提供もそうだし、いろいろなノウハウをあるいはレコメンデーションをいただいているところが非常に大きいものがあります。
So these are some examples, but in addition to these material offers, a very important offer that we are receiving from overseas include know-how as well as recommendations.
1点だけ補足させていただきたいと思います。先日の菅総理とメルケル首相の電話会談におきまして、メルケル首相の方からロボットの提供について言及があったというふうに承知しております。この点については実際の必要性、可能性等について調べた上で検討をするということになっているというふうに聞いております。
I just want to make one additional comment. In the telephone conversation held between Prime Minister Kahn and Prime Minister Merkel of Germany, I am aware, I know that there was mention from Prime Minister Merkel about providing robots. And I am aware that the actual provision of these robots is going to be considered after we check on the actual need and possibility.
Any other questions? Azhari-san.
Yes. Thank you. Khaldun Azhari, Pan Orient News. Mr. Nishiyama, I think many times you didn't answer the question, what is the worst case scenario? That's the policy, it seems. So I would like to ask you, what is the best case scenario? I mean, scientifically speaking, what would be the best way to solve this problem other than like pumping the water, which you said it's taking a long time? I mean, if it snows, for example, or if something happens, how do you think it will be solved? Thank you.
パンオリエントニュースですけれども、西山審議官は今まで何回も、 ワーストケース、最悪のシナリオはどういったものかという質問に対してお答えいただいてませんので、きっと方針としてお答えにならないんだと思いますので、逆にベストケースのシナリオは何か伺いたいと思います。科学的に言った場合、例えばそのこのポンプで水をどうこうするとかいうのは相当時間がかかっていますが、それ以外で解決する一番いい方法というのはどんなことがあり得るのか、何か起こった場合にはそれはどうやって解決されるんでしょうか。
まず我々は、今の、やっている戦略をなんとか成功させること、それがベストケースでもありミニマムなケースでもあるということじゃないかと思っています。その内容はこの燃料をしっかり水で冷却している間に持続可能な海水と熱交換をする冷却可能な冷却システムを作り上げる。それによって燃料をとにかく低温の停止の状態に持ち込むということであります。これが我々としては今とにかく実現しなくてはいけないシナリオです。
First of all, we consider that the strategy that we are now working with and to bring the strategy that we are now working with somehow to a success would be the best case and also the minimum case required. And the actual substance of the strategy that we are now working with is to create a sustainable cooling system through a heat exchange with seawater while cooling the fuel with water, and to bring the fuel to a cold shutdown. And this is what we have to achieve.
Yes, perhaps my name is Daniel Leusing from Asia Times Online. Perhaps also for Nishiyama-san, but maybe also if somebody else wants to answer this question. Because Japanese, they are known throughout the world as being very amazing engineers. Take, for example, the train system in Tokyo, or the Shinkansen, or the robots which were just mentioned. So it's kind of remarkable in a way that like putting a set of like basic pumps and basic pipelines could take like many days for Japanese, because you're specialized in engineering solutions. But on the other hand, Japanese are also known as people who sometimes seek consensus, and then after getting consensus, they act on that. But taking consensus can take a long time. So my question. With this cooling system, devising a cooling system, what were the most difficult, of the key points to overcome when you decided on this strategy to set out? Thank you.
アジアタイムズオンラインですけれども、西山審議官、あるいはその他の方でもお答えいただける方に伺いたいんですけれども、世界で日本人というのはものすごいエンジニアだということで知られております。例えば東京の鉄道網にしてもそうですし、新幹線、ロボットなどもそうです。ですから例えば非常に基本的なポンプとかパイプなどを置いて、それに何日もかかってやっているというのは、それはそれでものすごいと思うんですけれども、それと同時に日本の人たちというのはコンセンサスを求める ということでも知られております。で、コンセンサスを得てから行動に移すと。だけど、そのコンセンサスを得るのに長い時間かかる場合もあるということでも知られているんですけれども、この冷却システムを構築するにあたって、もともとこういった今おっしゃったようなその冷却システムを構築するという戦略を決定した段階で、何が最も難しい点、すなわち、克服すべき、キーポイントは何だとお考え、だったのでしょうか。
まずいろいろな側面がありますけれども、一つは今回津波の被害を受けて、水が多くある中で、機械は電気で動きますから非常に水に弱いところがあるわけで、そういう中でこの電気を復活させて、冷却システムをよみがえらさなければいけない。しかしそこにはその放射能の妨げがあるという、こういう状況というのが一番厳しいように思います。
There are different dimensions to this, but I think the most challenging point is that this time we suffered damage from the tsunami, and we had a lot of water around us. However, machinery that runs on electricity is at the same time vulnerable to water. So the most challenging part is that we have to restore electricity and restore the cooling system, but our work is hindered by the radiation.
あとは最初の段階では電源が津波によって電源が失われた後、その電気をどう通すか、それから水をどう手に入れるか、この2つについて非常な困難があって、燃料の損傷ということにもなってしまいましたので、過去を振り返れば、そこに最初の難しさがありました。
And also at the initial stage, the power source was lost due to the tsunami. And the two major difficulties we faced was how to get the electricity back online, and also how to secure the water. And I think these two difficulties resulted in the damage to the fuel. So looking back, I believe in the initial stages, these were the two major difficulties.
The very last question. Okay. Dennis?
Dennis Normile of Science Magazine again. Mr. Yokota from the Ministry of Health and Welfare, I believe you cannot discuss monitoring radiation in marine products. That is probably the Fisheries Agency, is that correct?
サイエンスマガジンですけれども、厚生労働省の横田さんに伺いたいんですけれども、海産物における、放射能のモニタリングに関しては、これは水産省の担当で横田さんではご発言はできないんでしょうかというふうに思うんですが。To the extent that I know.
Well, okay, my understanding, I was looking at the Fisheries Agency webpage today, and my understanding is that fishing has been stopped in Fukushima and the neighboring prefectures. That fishing is continuing in Chiba Prefecture, but the products are being monitored. Do you know what the plan for monitoring is in the future? Will, of course, the fish don't know where the prefecture lines are. They go anywhere. Will that monitoring of seafood products have to be widened to other areas? And perhaps this is something the Ministry of Health can address. could the radiation in the seawater prevent people from swimming in the ocean this summer?
そうしましたら、私の理解では、今日水産庁のホームページを見ておりましたら、私の理解では、福島県並びに近隣の県では、漁業が停止されたというふうに理解しておりますが、千葉県では漁業活動はまだ続いているけれども、取られた海産物に関してはモニタリングが行われているというふうに聞いておりますので、今後のモニタリングの計画はどういった計画なのかご存知ならば伺いたいんですけれども、魚というのは別にその県境を意識して泳いでいるわけではないので、県境関係なくどこにでも泳いでいくと思いますので、そうしますと今後は海産物に関してのモニタリングは他の地域にも広げていかなければならないんではないかと思うんですけれども、それが第1点。あと次の点は、これはおそらく厚生労働省の担当の分野だと思うんですけれども、海水の放射能レベルを考えると、今年の夏は海で泳ぐことができなくなるんでしょうか。人間が
最初の魚の関係の質問ですけれども、ご指摘の通り、千葉の方はこのまとめている方でモニタリングやっているということで、千葉の方は漁業行われているということで、検査の方も行っているということで、福島の方は今のところその地震の関係で漁業を行っていないということですけれども、仮に再開するようなことがあれば、当然そのモニタリング対象として水産物等も対象にして検査等を行っていくことになると考えております。それからちょっとその海水の放射線レベルの話は、その実際の海水の濃度等がどれぐらいかというのをちょっと今後引き続き見守りながら検討していく必要があるのかなというふうに考えております。
First of all, regarding the fish, as you have mentioned, Chiba Prefecture is subject to monitoring because fishing activities are continuing. Whereas in the case of Fukushima Prefecture, since fishing activities are not going on at the moment because of the earthquake, the monitoring is not done. But if fishing activities are to be resumed in Fukushima Prefecture, they will also be subject to monitoring, and the fish products or the fish that are caught would probably be subject to screening as well. And in response to your second question about the radiation in seawater, we probably would need to follow and study to what the extent of concentration of radiation in seawater.
ちょっと一点だけすみません、ちょっとさっきの説明で間違ったところありますけども、このまとめている1枚紙の方を見ていただきますと、福島の方も数は少ないんですけども、マリンプロダクトの方は2件検査の方しておりまして、一応そのアクションレベルを超えたものは出ていないという状況でございます。
Excuse me, I want to make one correction. As you can see on page 1, although limited, we have checked or screened 2 marine products from Fukushima Prefecture. And the result was that there were no marine products that exceeded the action level.
And also, you have probably seen the paper distributed by Nuclear Safety Commission, point 4 environmental sample, where there is a reference to the nature of marine products, which it's the second page, which I quote, "It is considered that the concentration of radioactive materials emitted into the seawater will be considerably thinned, since it is proliferated along with the tidal current, so forth." So, so there is the kind of unique nature in terms of the proliferation of radioactive materials in the ocean. Okay. very last.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just follow up. You know, the fish is moving, so if you prevent fishing in Fukushima, we don't know if the fish stays in Fukushima or move to other parts. So are you taking this into consideration when you check the marine products that served in Japan in general? Thank you.
ちょっと関連質問ですけれども、でも魚というのはどんどん動き回っているわけですので、福島県で漁業をやらないとしても、漁業を禁止したとしても、そしたら別にその福島県沖の魚がその近海にずっといるわけではないということも考えていらっしゃるんでしょうか。海産物の検査をやる場合、その日本の食卓に上がる海産物の検査をする場合には、そういったことも考慮に入れられているんでしょうか。
それで、魚が動くという話ですけども、実際そういう意味で、仮に実際千葉で上がっている魚で検査の方をしてまして、今のところ超えているものは出ていないというような状況でございます。
On the point you made that fish move around, in that sense, that is why we are monitoring and screening the fish that is taken in Chiba Prefecture, and at the moment we have not found any samples that exceed the action level.
でそれから専門家の見解ですけれども、海中に放出された放射性物質ですけれども、潮流等に流されて拡散していくということもございますし、あと実際魚とかに取り込まれるまで、相当程度薄まるということも考えられると。
And also, as expert opinion has stated, the radiation that is emitted into the sea is actually spread through the tidal wave and is diluted and dissipated in the process, and would be considerably diluted before it is taken in by fish.
それからさらに加えますと、要素につきましては、半減期が8日と比較的短いということで、実際に人が食するまでには相当程度低減しているというようなことも考えられるというような状況でございます。
And also, iodine has a relatively short half-life of 8 days, so it would be assumed that the level of iodine would be considerably lowered before any intake by human beings.
Very short one, yes.
すみません、AP 通信の山口です。西山さんにお尋ねしたいんですけれども、線量を測るその計測器が地震でダメージを受けて足りなくなっていて、作業員の間で一時期シェアをされていたということですけれども、これはいつ頃からもう最初からそうなっていたのか、どの程度の期間継続していたのかということと、これは法で決まっていて、1人1個というふうに定められているようですが、それをするのが著しく困難な場合は例外というふうに認められるというふうに理解しているんですが、今回はその例外に当てはまるということで、その保安院の方でも許可をされたのか、東電の方からもこういう状況なんですけれどもという問い合わせがあって、ちゃんとしたやり取りがあって、そういう条件の下で行われていたことかどうか教えていただければと思うんですが。
I am Yamaguchi from AP, and I have a question to Mr. Nishiyama. I understand that the measuring machine for measuring the dose rate has been reduced in number due to the earthquake. And at one time, the workers had to share these dosimeters. From when has that been taking place? Is it from the beginning? And how long has that situation continued? It is provided by law that each worker should have one dosimeter. With the exception when that is extremely difficult. And the case that was encountered this time was that allowed as an exception. In other words, did you receive an inquiry from TEPCO, and was there a communication between the authorities and TEPCO, and has this situation been permitted by TEPCO, permitted by the authorities as an exception?
まず私の理解ではこの、個人の線量計に関する特別措置、グループで、一つなりの線量計を持つことでやむを得ないとしたのはこの地震によって、相当多くの線量計が破壊されてしまった後だと理解しています。
It is my understanding that the special measure in which a dosimeter was shared by a group, and there was one dosimeter per group, was a situation that could not be helped because of a considerable number of dosimeters being destroyed by the earthquake.
それで原子炉等規制法、原子炉の等規制法という経済産業省が担当している、法律との関係ではこの保安規定という各会社が定める規定に従って、やればよくて、この措置はこの緊急時としては保安規定に従ったものと認められています。
And according to the nuclear regulation law, which is a law under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, it is provided that the company is to act in accordance with the safety provisions, which is to be provided by each company. And under this emergency situation, I believe it can be recognized that this was a measure that was in accordance with the safety provisions.
Well, this concludes today's briefing. During the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, I think we will have probably one briefing, most likely Sunday evening, at the Prime Minister's office. And there may be one at the Foreign Press Center tomorrow evening as things are prepared. Thank you.